Canada, at the end of the 18th century, was a land of harsh winters, forests, and rivers, where colonial towns were only beginning to transform into centers of trade and industry. At that time, Montreal was a small but rapidly growing city, where British law coexisted with French culture and ships carrying goods from Europe constantly docked in the harbor. It was here, in 1782, that a young Englishman named John Molson arrived, destined to found a dynasty that would forever change the face of Canada. John was born in Lincolnshire in 1763 into a modest family with little in the way of prospects. England was living through an era of change. The Industrial Revolution was just beginning. Social divisions were enormous, and opportunities for a young man without wealth were limited. John understood that if he wanted something greater, he had to go somewhere where not everything was already divided, a place where one could forge his own destiny. Montreal at that time was exactly such a place. Cultures intertwined, trade flourished, and European settlers searched for fortune on the new land. Young Molson was full of energy and ambition. In 1786, at just 23 years old, he founded a small brewery. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, but this moment became the starting point of a story that would span centuries. Beer in those days was not merely a drink. It often replaced unsafe water, served as a source of calories for workers, and accompanied almost every celebration. Yet Molson saw beyond that. He understood that a brewery could become not just a business, but a symbol of quality and trust. He brewed the first batches himself, experimenting with ingredients and recipes. His beer quickly gained popularity in Montreal's taverns. But John did not limit himself to brewing. He had an entrepreneurial spirit that drove him into various ventures. In 1809, he built the first steamship in Canada, opening the era of steam navigation on the St. Lawrence River. This was a remarkable leap forward. Goods and passengers could now move faster than ever before. Soon, Molson invested in railroads, hospitals, and theaters. He was not only a businessman, but an architect of a new Canada. By the middle of the 19th century, the Molson family was firmly established within the elite of Montreal. Their name had become a symbol of reliability and progress. They not only developed their brewing enterprise, but also helped to build society, funding medical institutions, education, and culture. By the 1850s, Molson beer was sold far beyond Montreal, and the dynasty itself was considered one of the cornerstones of the Canadian economy. Yet, with wealth came challenges. The family faced competition, economic crises, and wars. During the American Revolution and subsequent conflicts, their markets often contracted. But the Molsons had the ability to turn every crisis into an opportunity. They expanded production, adopted new technologies, and entered new markets. The story of John Molson and his first descendants is one of persistence and foresight. Beginning with a small brewery, they laid the foundation for an empire. By the end of the 19th century, the name Molson was no longer just a beverage brand, but a symbol of an entire era. And here lies the first secret of the dynasty. They never saw themselves solely as brewers. For them, business was part of a larger picture, part of building society, part of what would later be called the Canadian dream. As the 19th century came to a close, the Molson family already held a special place in Canada. Their business was multifaceted, and their name had become synonymous with reliability and innovation. But a new century was dawning, bringing with it new challenges. Economic crises, wars, and shifts in politics and culture all threatened even the strongest dynasties. Yet it was precisely their ability to adapt that helped the Molsons not only to survive, but to become a legend. Prohibition, introduced at the beginning of the 20th century, struck a heavy blow against the brewing industry worldwide. In Canada, it varied from province to province, but the threat was universal. For the Molsons, this was a moment of truth. Their flagship product was suddenly outlawed. Many competitors collapsed and went bankrupt. But the family demonstrated remarkable flexibility. They shifted their focus to producing non-alcoholic beverages, carbonated water, and also invested in other industries to stay afloat. This ability to find alternative paths became their second secret. Unlike many other companies that saw themselves only as brewers, the Molsons always understood that the key to success was diversification. They invested in banking, transportation, real estate, and even sports. It was during these years that the family strengthened its ties to hockey, which would soon become Canada's national pride. After the end of Prohibition and the conclusion of the First World War, life gradually returned to normal. The Molson Brewery restored production and did so on a grand scale. Their products once again appeared on store shelves, but now as part of national culture. Drinking Molson beer became something like a ritual, an almost symbolic gesture of belonging to Canadian society. The Second World War brought new trials. Many members of the family participated in supporting the army and financing various projects. Molson factories worked not only to produce beer, but also to supply raw materials and goods needed at the front. During this time, the Molson name became associated with patriotism and contribution to victory. By the middle of the 20th century, the company had grown into one of the largest brewing corporations in North America. But equally important was the fact that the family managed to turn the brand into a part of national identity. They understood that Canada needed symbols to unite its people, and Molson became one of those symbols. The company's advertising campaigns emphasized simple but important values: unity, pride in the country, and respect for tradition. Molson beer was promoted not as just a drink, but as a part of the Canadian way of life. Their famous slogan, "I am Canadian," became a true cultural phenomenon and secured the brand in the national consciousness. But behind the polished image, there was also internal struggle. Like many dynasties, the Molsons faced disagreements within the family. Questions about who would manage the business, how profits would be divided, and how to balance tradition with innovation often led to tense moments. Yet they shared one essential understanding, that the name Molson was greater than any one individual. It was a legacy that had to be preserved. By the 1970s, the Molson family had become one of the most influential in Canada. Their fortune was measured in millions, but even more importantly, they controlled part of the country's cultural sphere, funding theaters, museums, universities, and participating in charitable projects made the Molson name more than a business brand. It became a symbol of public contribution. Sport took a special place in their legacy. The family became owners of the Montreal Canadiens hockey team, one of the most decorated clubs in NHL history. For Canadians, hockey was more than a sport. It was an expression of national pride, and the Molson name carried special weight in this context. Not only was their beer consumed by fans, but they also supported the team that the entire country cheered for. Thus, the 20th century was for the Molsons an era of transformation from simply a wealthy family into a true dynasty whose influence was felt in all spheres of life, from economics to culture. They endured prohibition, world wars, crises, and competition, and each time emerged stronger. At the beginning of the 21st century, the Molson family faced a new challenge: globalization. Competition in the beverage market grew fiercer as international corporations merged to form giant conglomerates capable of dictating terms across entire continents. It seemed that for a family company from Canada, this could mean the end of a unique story. But it was at that moment that the Molsons made a move that inscribed their name into global business history. In 2005, a decisive event took place. Molson merged with the American company Coors to form Molson Coors Brewing Company. This was more than a union of two beer producers. It was a merging of cultures, traditions, and strategies. For Canada, it meant that its flagship beer brand had stepped onto a new level and become part of the global stage. Many feared that, after such a merger, the Molson name would lose its uniqueness and dissolve within the corporation. But the opposite happened. Thanks to centuries of history and a strong identity, the Molson brand retained its face. It was still associated with Canada, with its hockey, its celebrations, and its unique way of life. Moreover, the family name remained in the spotlight as the descendants of John Molson continued to take part in management and cultural activities. Today, Molson Coors is one of the largest brewing companies in the world. Its products are sold in dozens of countries, and the Molson brand continues to stand as a symbol of Canada. Advertising campaigns still focus on national identity, reminding Canadians that this product is part of their culture. But the story of the Molsons is not only about business, it is also a legacy woven into the cultural fabric of the country. The family continues to actively support the arts, education, and sports. Their name is carried by university campuses, theaters, and cultural centers. Their charitable foundations help thousands of people, and their connection with hockey, cemented in the 20th century, turned them into part of Canada's sporting mythology. The main strength of the Molson dynasty lies in their ability to keep pace with the times. In the 19th century, they built bridges and banks. In the 20th, they survived prohibition and world wars. And in the 21st, they accepted the challenge of globalization. Their story is one of survival, adaptation, and the constant search for new opportunities. Today, the Molson name means much more than just beer. It is a symbol of Canadian identity, cultural heritage, and entrepreneurial spirit. It is the story of a family that began with a small brewery in Montreal and became one of the most renowned dynasties in North America. And if in the 19th century their success seemed like a story of luck, in the 21st century it is clear that it is the result of strategic thinking, perseverance, and the ability to create values that endure across generations.